I would wake up in the morning. Yeah, I was at one point in my life where I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say, today's a good fucking day to die. You know, and that's how I got through in prison.
It took a lot of violence in my life to make me a milder man.
Never, 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 never give up. I don't give up. I get knocked down, I get back up. And keep believing that I can do it. I'll find a way.
My name is Derek. I live in Victoria, BC. I work as a community support worker. I was born in Montreal, Quebec. I had a good upbringing. My mother was a good mom. She's basically sacrificed her life to bring us up early. She got a job. I have a brother that's handicapped who has a little bit of disabilities, and she takes care of him, and so she took care of him and us. Went to work every day. We never had to want for nothing. Christmas time was good every year. I have good memories of my family, and yeah, no regrets. When I was 15, there was a stepfather in the picture. He was a goof. I wanted to leave. I left the house at 15. My mother's happiness was more important. She's going to be with this guy for a long time. I'm leaving in a couple of years anyway, so I'm leaving now. And I left when I was 15. And I went to my aunt's house in Toronto, Ajax, Ontario. I lived with my aunt and uncle for a couple of months till they got sick of me, because I smoked in their house. I broke their rules. I was a little shithead. And so they kicked me out, and I got my own apartment because I had a job by then, and it was downtown Toronto.
So what did you do to make money and survive in downtown Toronto?
I started hanging around a pool hall, and I started selling weed in the pool hall. I quit my job, sold weed at the pool, just played pool all day for a couple of years, and then I started doing hard drugs. That's when it started to fall. I was living with this lady. She had like 3 kids. I was all right. I was happy. I was in jail. I just got out of jail. I was like with her for about 6 months. I was going to AA meetings. I was trying to get myself back on track, working as a welder at that place I told you that's taken me back so many times. This is one of those times when they took me back. And so I was coming home from work on River Road, and this guy in the truck, anyways, he came out of a parking lot, swiped into my car, right into the front end of my car, and he was like totally in the wrong. The road was wet. I saw him coming at me, and I tried but the road was wet, and so the car just didn't stop. It just kept going, and then he just hit me, and next thing I know, everything was black, and I woke up outside the car. The door was open. I was like on the floor, half out of the car. There was blood coming out of my forehead. And I remember I just got up and walked away. I went to my house. I think I lived like a block away. And my girlfriend was there. Oh my God. She grabbed my head. She's like tapping, and she put crazy glue on my forehead. And I held it closed and stopped the bleeding, and I went back to the accident. I went back to the accident and dealt with the cops and everything like that. I don't know how I got even through that, man. I don't remember much of that. I just remember after that, like self-medicating myself, like right away I started, and I was hearing voices and total loss. Yeah, I went to the hospital and they kicked me out. They said, well, you're drunk, get out of here. Like, cause I had a past of like going there when I was drunk and stuff, and they assumed I was drunk, and I was lost, man. I did a crime.
What did you do?
That night I did, I walked into a donut shop on 72nd Avenue in Surrey, and I grabbed the cash register off the counter and I smashed it on the ground. I didn't take anything. I just took it, smashed it on the ground, and left in my own car. And when I was driving away, they got my plate. And before I got home, I was pulled over and arrested. But then they let me out on bail. And I was like, still like lost, man. And what happened? I didn't have a car. My girlfriend kicked me out of the house, and I ended up down in New Westminster, and I went into this mall that had the jewelry store. I broke into the jewelry store, and I didn't realize that there was a security guard in the mall. Even though I had gotten disconnected the alarm system, there was still a guy walking around. I didn't know that. And he heard me in the store. And so he went and he called the cops. And just as I was coming out of the store with the bag, and the cops were there, freeze, freeze. And I heard the guy go, tase him, tase him, tase him. And I was like, and I was like, tase him again, tase him again. And I woke up at a police station. I was like, what the fuck? They were pulling some kind of fish hook out of my head from the taser gun. And yeah, there was no bail then. Well, they kept asking me, like, why can't I know? How come I'm not buying canteen? Like, you know, every week you got to fill out the canteen form, right? And then it's like, the guy's like, how come you're not coming out of your cell? Like, you're always in your cell. Yeah, so the guy says to me, goes like, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I go, I'm hearing voices. As soon as I told, I go, I'm hearing voices. I'm hallucinating. I'm hearing voices. And he asked me, like, how long's that been going on? I said, you know, for a while. And I have a constant ringing in my ears. And I said to him, I go, before I was arrested, I was in a car accident. And he said to me, oh, we're going to go do a CT scan on your brain. And so when they sent me to the hospital, and I think it was in Abbotsford, I'm not sure. It was like a big haze, man. It's like, so I go to the hospital, they put me in this big machine, and then they stick this other thing on my head with all these wires coming out of it, and then they come back and tell me I have like frontal lobe damage and a crushed disc in my neck from the impact of my head hitting whatever it hit, right? And I was like, I don't feel any pain. Oh yeah, and I'm taking methadone all this time too. So this is a huge handicap on top of the brain injury, right? And I don't feel the pain because of the methadone. And also self-medicating, you know, with other drugs like cocaine and stuff. So, you know, I didn't realize that I even had that. And yeah, so right after that, they were like, hey, we're gonna start giving you like rehab. And then they gave me a medical bed. They sent me over to the medical wing, Pacifica. And yeah, then they taught me how to like first to buy canteen, you know, how to, you know, get my hygiene stuff. It was very easy and slow. Lots of people were helpful there. It wasn't like a jail. It was literally like being in a hospital, in a jail. like everybody was like, there's no more jail shit in there. There's no like, you know what I mean? There's no muscling or anybody like, it's just straight up everybody wants to get better. So it was a pretty good environment.
Hi, my name is Richard Cowichan, and I'm the executive director of a society called Cultivating Local Yokel Society. I was born in St. Boniface, Manitoba, and I grew up in Marchand, Manitoba, which is not far from Winnipeg. It's a small Métis community that was resurrected, I guess, after Louis Riel was hung for treason in Saskatchewan, and they took all the settlers' properties and confiscated them, and then all of the Métis scattered into, mostly it was the swamps where our families grew up, and we worked as lumberjacks and whatever else we could there, and trappers during that time. Well, actually, I was not even walking yet, but I don't remember everything about it, but I remember one incident in particular because it became out of my mind. I was sitting in a tub. It was a galvanized tub, a squarish one, and it was sunny outside. And I remember looking at a building beside me. It had stucco on it, and it was a log house, and it was sunny outside. And then I remember all of a sudden something happening, and then I felt something warm going down my face, and I could see the blood pouring down my head into the tub, because the tub slowly filled with blood, right? And that's all I remember of that, right, particular thing. But
Do you think it might have been an attempt on your life?
pardon me?
Do you think that someone was trying to murder you?
I don't know to this day. Yeah, obviously someone did, because it hit me with something hard enough that I was just, bleeding that much. It was bleeding lots, yeah. Then when I was 5 years old, I remember first going to school. And my first days to school, I used to go next door neighbor to see my friend, and we go to school. When I went there one day, I found out he didn't answer the door, and nobody answered the door. So I looked through the window, and I saw there was blood all over the place and hair on the floor, and I found out later that the fellow who had lived there had murdered his wife and his daughter, right? So my father and mother decided that they wanted to move to the city to get away from there. So we moved into Winnipeg, into a slum area called Jarvis Avenue. My father was he was from Quebec, and my mom was from France. Her name was Marie Antoinette Parisian, and my dad's name was Coetzee, of course. They married in Marchand, Manitoba, and they had 11 children. Well, I'm one of them, and there was only 10 of us as survivors now. And during that time in Woodridge that we were there, we lived in this log cabin. It was a small place. And we had a garden around our house, and we lived off the garden, and from trapping, from what my dad caught and what we caught, rabbits and deer and bears, whatever, and raised a small farm. My mother, she hated me, right, and she didn't make no qualms about letting me know that. And I was the last to be fed and whatever, and clothed and whatever. I was the black sheep of the family to her, right? My father was a heavy drinker, so he drank and drank. never paid much attention to us, so we were on the streets pretty much since the time I was about 7, I guess. And we survived by robbing people, breaking in places and trying to get money to, or food and money to live. And my mother and father wouldn't let us in the house, they just abandoned us. And so we did this I did this for maybe a year or 2 years. I got caught and I got put into reform school. And then I got into a place called Portage Prairie Home for Boys. And I was there for 8 years. And I escaped a few times here and there. And, you know, I got in a fight with this native, Ralph Antoine, I remember his name. You had to, around your bed in your dormitory, you had to scrape it with a steel wool, and then you had to wax the floor and then polish it, your area. Everybody had to do this. It was my job to do that. And I just finished doing it, and he came over, and there was a basin full of water, dirty water, and he stepped on it and flipped all over the floor. So I spun out on him, and I started fighting with him, and I beat him up right. And then right in the process of beating him up, William Faulkner came in. He was the house father. He threw me down one flight of stairs, down another, and I was in the basement. And he said, "Well, hold your arms like this." He said, "Right." He pulled out this strap, and this strap had a handle on it. He held it with both of his hands. It was that wide, that thick, and that long, and it was made out of like a tractor belt type of material. And he hit me in the tip of the fingers with it. And when he swung like this, then he hit me on this and this and this until he had gone all the way up my arms with this 10 on each side. And he said, "If you move once," he said, "I'll beat you all over your whole body with this strap." So I didn't move. And anyways, my arms were purple right through and through. You could see them right after. And I still, to this day, I still sit on my hands sometimes because of my hands remember, I guess, what happened. So they give you a number. Mine was 9539. I always remember my number. And they assigned me to the sheet metal shop. And I worked in the sheet metal shop for, it was about, I don't know, 2.5 years I was there, right, out of my sentence. And just before that time, though, I started a riot in the penitentiary by throwing my tray against the wall because the food was horrible, and I wanted to do something about it, and I did, and they threw me in a hole, and I stayed in the hole for about 3 months. They're only supposed to keep you there 30 days, and I stayed in 3 months. And during that time, then I got more time for 6 more months of my sentence for doing that, inciting a riot. Then after all this, I went up Island, get a job, right? Found a job there I went to visit my brother shortly. He was up he lived in Comox, right? I stayed there one night in my car, and I drove up to Campbell River because they had an ad up there of someone to work in a bush camp, right? So I went and I worked at a bush camp up there. A guy was remodeling a big old logging camp. And my job was to cut down a bunch of trees for openings to put campers in there, and so I was doing this for a while, right? And then we were dropping a lot of them into the ocean, so I had to go and make it was like a log boom. You put a hole through a log, you pass a chain through it, then you put another log, you pass a chain through it. And when I was doing this, I fell between 2 logs and boom, right? Got a brain injury right there, right? And I was transferred to Courtney Hospital, right?
The challenges of working with the brain injury survivors who are coming from the prison population definitely is stigma. People just assume that they're going to be violent offenders when they come in here, or they're going to be dangerous. And that's not always the case at all.
Raising awareness around traumatic brain injuries is, incredibly important, because it's one of those injuries that's invisible, and, your frontal lobes control the executive functioning around your, emotional reactions to everyday things. And when that's damaged, a reaction can be so out of whack to the situation, and when that occurs, it's very confusing for everyone. And there might be simple things as just being able to handle certain levels of stimulus. And when there's the lack of understanding around why somebody may be reacting this way, it's immediately attributed that this person is, a bad person, there's something wrong with them, and then they're ostracized, and it just feeds into this loneliness and marginalization.
My name is Jim Madeline. I work for the Homelessness Services Association of British Columbia. I was born in 1955 in Calgary, Alberta, and very quickly my mom and my dad, we moved up into the farm where my dad grew up near Leslieville, Alberta. My relationship with my father was one that I was a sensitive, gentle kid, and he was a harsh guy, and he would punch me around and try to make it so that I wouldn't cry. I had to figure that out, and I figured it out, and I didn't cry when he punched me to the ground, and then he said, "That's my Boaz, you gotta be tough." And that's what I stopped crying back when I was a kid, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. I didn't cry anymore.
What would happen if you did cry?
He would punch me, and he, stop that crying. And, even if I hurt myself or had an accident, I'd get punched.
Did your mother ever intervene?
My mother was punched a lot of times and by my dad, and she left when I was 3. So I never saw her again till I was an adult. So the area that I grew up in was considered the Canadian headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. My father fell into that, trying to pretend he was somebody else. And then he became very racist, and he fell into the Klan and did whatever the Klan did. My father, besides beating the crap out of me, would come home late at night and fight everybody, and then he would calm down and he would try to have sex with my aunt. My aunt and my brother and I slept in the same room in the attic. And as he tried to have sex with my aunt, she would take off, and then my dad would come to me and he would sodomize me, put it bluntly. And later on in life, when I was older, I was in Vancouver. A doctor said that I had torn a sphincter muscle, and they were going to go and sew it or something like that. I don't know what. I didn't do it, but it made it so that my brother and I were running around. We're in a field or whatever, and all of a sudden I have to go to the bathroom to take a take a poo, and I have to drop my pants and take a poo right now, because there's no sphincter muscle to hold it. I couldn't hold it because of the torn sphincter muscle. And so yeah, I live with that. I still live with that. Well, it seemed like my aunt was kind of cast into that role of being the mother, because my grandmother said she wanted me in the house. She wanted me to be raised Christian. I don't think my aunt wanted to do that. So during the day, my aunt was like cold as ice to me, treating me like crap. But at night, because we were in the same room and the attic wasn't very big, and there was like 2 beds. I had a single bed, and she had a twin bed, and my brother slept on that side of her, and I slept on that side of her. And during the night, somewhere along the way, her hand came over and started playing with my penis. And I didn't know what it was right away, but afterwards I knew that she was masturbating herself. And that became this quiet thing that nobody talked about. And I just kind of like, laid there, and then she would go to sleep, and I'd lay there, and like I didn't understand it. I didn't like it, but I didn't understand it. So she really never was my mother. She never did anything motherly.
When did thoughts of suicide start entering your mind?
I don't remember exactly, but quite early. And I remember the first time I tried was when I was 11. I was 11 years old, and I just felt so cornered by all of my life. And so what I did is I had learned to braid a rope. One of my uncles taught me how to braid a rope, and the rope was braided from baler twine from the hay bales. And I made a rope, and I went into the up the ladder in the barn loft, and I tied it. I piled the bales up, and I tied it up there, and then I put it around my neck, and I kicked the bales out, and I was hanging there. And I guess the knot, if the knot would have slipped through, that would have been it. But it hung there, and I just kind of hung there like this. And I couldn't get down, I couldn't do anything. And then my aunt, she came and saw me there, and she cut me down. And I remember screaming at her, like, "Take me to the mental hospital, take me to the mental hospital." Because my uncle said that this is not your home. And if you don't do work, we're going to send you to the Indian Reserve. And the story there goes that if you send you to the Indian Reserve, they'll cut your balls off with sardine can lid. Well, besides my uncle whacking me and knocking me out, or my dad punching me, like he would punch me in the side of the head and knock me out, and don't remember. And then the bullies in school. Lots of them were bullies in school, and I'd be walking down the hallway, and these big kids would come, like they'd play hockey, and I'd body check me and smash me down, and I'd hit my head, and I don't even know who I was or where I was or anything. And these other 3 big bullies, they threw me in the raging, it's called the Horse Guard Creek, where I used to go and drink my beer and stuff. And it was raging, and it was like, spring and water just going crazy, and they threw me in, and I couldn't swim. And I just I knew I was done. But I was underwater, and I just kind of like, I remember kind of just saying, okay, if I have to go, I'm going. Let myself go. And just as I was at a certain point, this big branch of a tree was right into the water. And I ran into it, and I just grabbed it, and I pulled myself out on the other side of the river. I didn't lose consciousness, but it was close. I lacked air. So these kinds of things were, it caused brain damage for sure. What I did for money is I panhandled and I sold drugs for the Satan's Angels. Dime bags of speed. And I would sell dime bags of speed and I would make enough money to put a dime bag and I start shooting up speed in my arm. It made me up, but it was kind of weird. It was a weird drug. Wouldn't let me go to sleep. And I stole it from stores. But where I started feeling like I come home, so to speak, is when I was with the bikers. I had the job of peeling potatoes and carrots, but I also had the job of picking up all the garbage from all the bins in the different departments of the kitchen and taking it to the back door when the gut wagon came. And I would take it out, and the guy was a biker, and he would give me a package of cocaine. He just shoved it down my pants, and he said, take it and drop it in the bin of the guy in the bakery department. And that became the guy in Calgary on the streets in the hotel. It was my father figure. One day, I brought drugs in, put it in his bin, and he came over and he just, like, instead of sending the go boy over and put it in he says, you want anything else? And I say, oh, if you're making any pies, I love pies and cakes. And he says, I'll make one for you. And I said, thanks, thanks for doing that. I really, really, appreciate it. And he gave me a hug. And I'm going, oh, that's the first time I got a hug. Well, I must have got a hug from my mother before I was 3, but I don't remember it. But that's the first time I got a hug. And it's like, big boys don't get hugs. My uncle told me, you don't hug, you hug a boy, you ruin him, you make him a homosexual. You yell at me. When I was 4, trying to sit on his knee before I knew how mean he was. But yeah, the big guy gave me a hug, and he put his arm around me, looked at all the guys in the kitchen, half of them were bikers. He says, anybody touches this punk kid, I kill him. I kill you.
So what was your plan when you got out?
This time or before? I never had
The
a
time
plan.
that you made a plan, what was your
Oh,
plan?
okay. The time I made a plan was when I was in William Head. And I was going out on passes to VBIS, Victoria Brain Injury Society. And I was like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? How am I going to, I started like in my head, I got no idea what I'm going to do. Am I going to go back to Surrey? Am I going to go, I had no idea. So I sat down with the lady from the brain injury. She said, let us help you.
I would love to see the criminal justice system have programs like coping, which we offer, ABI 101, which is like that's kind of our bread and butter course, where it's 4 weeks and you learn about the brain, you learn about what is a healthy brain and what is a brain after it's been injured and what are the differences. I would love to see more education in the criminal justice system. I know there's some programs that Prince George works with and Fraser Valley work with the criminal justice system doing those kind of education programs. We're trying really hard to get into Victoria. And then we would run those programs in the prison system and then make sure that people know when they get out, there's a place that they can come and be accepted.
Why is it important to address the issue of individuals with experience in the criminal justice system that have traumatic brain injury?
That's a great question. So, in one of my previous roles as a member of parliament, I served as the NDP's critic for public safety. And as a part of that, we deal with the federal corrections system, so the Correctional Service of Canada. I've had the opportunity, last summer, I went to the Lower Mainland and I visited 2 federal institutions. They told me that, in many instances, they just don't have the resources necessary to appropriately help the inmates that they're charged with. And they can see the instances where brain injury has led to interactions with the criminal justice system, and eventually that person being a resident in a federal institution. So I think not only within the institution, but also a more preventative approach at helping intervene before someone gets to that stage.
The importance of helping, offenders reintegrate into the community, and offenders that, also have traumatic brain injury, which when you start to look at the research is a very high percentage, is that I think one, as a society of people, the more individuals have a sense of belonging and contribute to the upkeep of society, the more effectively it runs. And so more people that are operating outside of that, it's a drain on the system, and it also it just increases the suffering of that individual.
And so the doctor from William Head came to see me, and he filled out those disability papers to get disability social assistance. And then I was contacted by the Critic.
Derek Forsyth, we had the privilege of Derek. He has gone through a long journey of living with brain injury, many of those years with undiagnosed. So he was, in a sense, just struggling and just, in a sense, meandering around meaninglessly. And but for good fortune for that he met a committed support person from the Victoria Brain Injury Society. She introduced him to the world of brain injury. She introduced him to it's okay that it's to have a brain injury, and then looked at how we're going to support Derek to move on from the criminal justice system to living in community. And he started with us at Mary Cridge Manor. He committed himself. I so admire Derek for his commitment. He committed to himself to weaning himself off methadone, and committed himself to living and wanting to contribute to community and improve his quality of life.
Derek, actually, him and I met when I worked with the Cridge Centre for the Family. I was their community program coordinator at Mary Cridge Manor, and Derek came to us as part of the program, transitional housing for 3 years, and we saw so much in him when he came, and he was very nervous to be there. For those first 6 months, it was a lot of just giving him leeway and saying to the support workers, I just want you to go knock on his door today. Just check in with him, see how he's doing, see if he's okay. And gradually, the door got a little wider in opening, and then he came to the hallway, and he would come to the office. And then I started working with him in counseling, and have always been impressed by his resiliency and his drive to improve his life.
From there, when they were closing that service, a lady named Martha, that was one of my support workers, her husband owns a garage. She said, why don't you go and change the garbages at my husband's garage? And I said, okay, I'll go sweep floors and change garbages. And they started training me while I was there. And they started showing me how to do oil changes, brakes. Now I do almost everything. So I wasn't sure if I was able to go back to school. So what I did was I went to UVic and registered to do a janitorial course, which is like 6 weeks only. Actually, it was 8 weeks, but it was 4 weeks in the class and 4 weeks working as a janitor to get certified. And so then Jeff registered me for the community support working course. And so once I passed the course, Jeff gave me a job at Mac House, full-time, working there as a care aide in the house.
it was a guy that was in prison with us. I didn't know him. My dad figure knew him, and a bunch of guys. And he came and sat with us in the bar, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's there's my bum boy." He was joking around to my dad. My dad figure was big. This guy wasn't very big. Anyways, this guy kept at him, and finally I could tell there was going to be a bloodbath, like, "Shut up, you idiot," kind of thing. And my dad figure looked at me and he said, like, he wanted me to take him out. And I'm going like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. I don't, this guy's like 35, 40 years old or something. Like, I didn't have any confidence in myself. And so I freaked out, and I just stood up, and this guy said something. He said to me, you like made fun of me some way. And I just reached over, grabbed his head, and bit his ear right off. I just, like this, bit his ear. And it came, it was hanging there. Pieces of it bit right off. Like I was like, like, because I was so scared. And this guy freaked out. He jumped up, and blood was squirting out of his head, and he's running towards the door, and I chased him, and I kicked him and out the door, and he was gone. And I'm going, "Oh my God, what was that?" And they come and sat down, and my dad figured, went, "Whiskey for the man. Here, try a little bit of this." And it's like, "Don't worry about doing a line, just stick your head in the bag." And I started this cocaine, and I went, "Pooah!" My brain just exploded, and I was like, "Yeah, that's what I need. I want to kill somebody. I wanted to kill my uncle. I wanted to kill my family." And that's when I ended up wanted to go drive, and I drove to the farm to kill them, high on cocaine. And the gun was a gun that I had taken away from somebody else, one of the guys that were collecting debts from. But that's the feeling I had, like, I'm gonna kill somewhere. I'm gonna show them, you're not gonna touch me ever again. I was in the Ponoka Mental Hospital treatment center. There's an alcohol treatment center on the part of it. They did all kinds of tests on me, and liver damage tests, I don't know, whatever they did, medical stuff. I saw the doctor and went to group therapy and this therapy and that therapy. And at the end of the day, I come back to my bunk to get ready for supper. And on the pillow was an apple, orange, and a banana. All of a sudden, I was getting ready for supper, and I just felt faint, and I just collapsed. And they wheeled me off into, like a unit where they can do the paddles and all that stuff. And the woman, there was a woman doctor. She was an old lady. She was just finishing off her medical career. She ordered a body bag. She said, "The guy's dead. The kid's dead." And I'm floating around over the farmlands like an eagle flying. It was beautiful, an incredible feeling. And I was going, "Wow, this is so great." I always wanted to be an eagle and fly around. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, like, wonder who put that apple, orange, and banana there. Wonder what that is. Is that what love is? And it was like this elastic band that I was hooked to, and I was stretching, and I was way out there and flying around, and then all of a sudden it goes, and I felt like I bounced on the gurney. And this doctor came to me, and she said, she'd like checking and doing whatever the doctors do and your heartbeat and all that stuff. And she says, "You were dead. I don't understand. I've never seen this happen before. I ordered a body bag. Why'd you come back? You're a wrecked kid. You got 7% of your liver left. You're a wrecked kid. You got no teeth left in your face. Why'd you come back?" And I told her, I says, "I had to find out who put the apple, orange, and banana." And she started to cry, and she said it was her. She said, it was me. You're a kid. You're 22 years old, and you're just a wrecked kid. And I just don't understand how you even are still alive. And apparently she said I had a heart attack. And so that gave me the impetus to change my life. It just like I was burning. It's like, okay, what can I do? What can I do? And the doctor, she said, "Jim, these university groups are coming into the hospital, but the alcohol ward. Can I get you to go and talk to them? Do 2 talks, and they can answer the questions." Sure. So I started my talks then, 1977.
Now, the weekend shooting has put new emphasis on efforts to keep kids from being lured into the gang lifestyle, which is something a former gang member is working to prevent. Tim Weeks caught up with him today.
What sort of people join gangs? People like Jim Mandolin.
So my question is, what happened to that little kid to become that violent?
He tells students at Glen Eagle Secondary how he was abused as a child, bullied in school, and finally accepted by a biker gang. He says he became a debt collector for the gang, where he says he felt appreciated. And he saw other members like himself, people filled with rage and a hunger for acceptance. People willing to shoot or beat others for money or just for whims.
Nurtured, cared for, loving, valued children do not do that. My work is to cut off the supply of gang members. Those gang members, all of them, ones with AK-47, was a kid sitting in a classroom at one time.
So Richard and I first met, I believe I was working on a project at the Boys and Girls Club, and a group from the Brain Injury Society came out, and Richard was part of that. I'd worked for an organization called Power to Be that did work with the Victoria Brain Injury Society, doing reintegration work and skill development work for folks, that had head injuries, rock climbing walls, and outdoor adventure therapy type items. And I think through those connections, but ultimately Richard had a background in agriculture, and that's what I didn't know anything about his history, but he was really interested in helping develop this agricultural garden. I was doing work with Youth at Risk to provide skill development and grow good, healthy, nutritious organic food to be shared with the community. At the same time, job skills. And so I remember Richard helping me refurbish a rototiller, and he had a bunch of things, and he had this really kind of can-do attitude where I think just circumstance of life, he had to figure out and learn a lot of skills on his own accord. And that type of initiative, I think, is something that's lacking in our current school system, and I was really drawn to that.
And he actually came to me, talked about wanted to be involved in the brain injury community, and so we looked at ways that he could participate with us.
Why did you decide to donate a space for Richard's Cultivating Local Yokel Society? Because
it works for him, and we had the space, so that's the important aspect for the Critic Brain Injury Program. We're going to partner with those who want to help the brain injury community. And if we have the resources, be it finances, be it personnel, be it space, we're happy to share that. Whatever people are doing to try and help the world of brain injury, we're all in.
And through a period of 2 years, this garden was developed, and then through that process, I got to learn more about Richard's story and was really moved by that. And I think it's a testament of, these brilliant individuals that at a very young age, because of their circumstances growing up in, poor families and then conflict, ending up into the criminal justice system, and before the age of 26, having spent 10 years incarcerated, and then having to start a life and the barriers. So it was a big eye-opener hearing that story, and I think switched me on to the work that needs to be done in terms of improving reintegration and supports for individuals.
What were the biggest barriers that you had to overcome to reintegrate?
To what?
To reintegrate.
It's racism. Yeah, and people being racist, and sometimes I don't even really expect it, right?
When you were in jail, did you feel that you were stigmatized because of your brain injury?
No, because I never had a brain injury until the last time I was in jail, and I got immediate help right away. But I recognized before, when I was in before, I've seen inmates. I just saw a documentary film the other night about a guy. They were talking about segregation and how bad it is to put people in segregation. And they had this guy from Millhaven who spent over 2 or 3 years in segregation. He's on the camera. I'm watching him on the camera, and I could spot this guy has a brain injury. And nobody is saying anything. And he's in and out of the hole. Why? He gets out, fight with another inmate, gets out, fight with the guard, gets out, fuck you this. It's because he's got a brain injury and nobody has diagnosed it, and he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison because of it. And I'm watching this on TV, and I'm like, fuck, it's still happening today. I mean, come on. You know why they're not getting help? Because that guy is a guaranteed place for them to get money from the government. He's a number 934303B FPS. That was my number for years, and it was just a $sign to the government. It should be, if you serve 2 years in jail, you should get 2 years of therapy. That's how it should be.
Yeah, I think that, when you're released from incarceration, there's a lot of trauma that happens inside prisons. And I think that one of the biggest missed opportunities is that we're not building the prison system as a more therapeutic environment to begin with, so that as soon as you enter into a correction facility, that's when your therapy begins. And we have like the best trauma counselors, we've got the best physical therapists all there to be able to rehabilitate people, like really help heal.
We all come here to this earth to seek connection and avoid rejection. And then when things happen along the way, there are disconnections. And so these traumatic events disconnect us from our community, disconnect us from employment, disconnect us from our relationships, and people go in this downward spiral. So what they're really trying to do is get back to connecting. For Derek, as an example, we can show that when he was able to get into stable housing, long-term supports, and then short-term supports as he needed them, it became a system of his life that he could work through the traumatic experiences that he'd had. He could work through his mental health challenges, and he could work on compensatory strategies for his brain injury so that he could connect in the community again. And so now Derek, is this person who had been an offender, a history of offenses and being in prison, now is a taxpayer like me and you and contributing to the community, and he gives back more than anybody I know in terms of volunteering and making sure that other people have opportunity to get the services. So we can help people lead quality of life and, the life that they deserve to have.
Well, I think that the incarceration system is not really a reality. They always say it's a we're going to rehabilitate people. But what is rehabilitate? Actually, if you look at the dictionary, it means restore to former condition. What was your former condition? It would have been really bad. But other than that, no, it's punishment. That's what they're aiming at, and they say it's not.
Only the strong ones get out of it alive. They just create more trauma. Because prisons are punishment. I do not believe in punishment. I believe in accountability, a restorative process, restoring relationship, restorative justice, I believe in. If you were kind to people in prison and you gave them kitty cats as pets or dogs or whenever they like, if they give the opportunity for them to soften and kindness is given, people can change. I believe people can change.
Part of why I've tried to make Bill C-277 so broad, when it makes mention of other stakeholders, I think that is going to, by default, have to include stakeholders in the criminal justice system. So, everyone in the court administration, prosecution, defense, judges, making them aware of where the gaps are. Well, actually, I think making the policymakers aware of where the gaps are. So, as part of the national strategy, if we're talking to the judge you just referenced who said, look, the only options I have when someone's got a TBI in front of me is that I can send them to this place to get an assessment, they come back to me, but more often than not, they're just going to end up incarcerated. Well, that's a really big issue and a problem that needs to be addressed. And it's my hope that the national strategy can address those kind of things, figure out where the resources are lacking, and figure out, what kind of other options do we have.
A national strategy can help develop those kind of guiding goals and overarching objectives that we could have provincially, and then the provinces would have to take that into context of what they're dealing with, and then it would trickle down into developing policies. And BC would be health authorities speaking to health authorities, because that's one of the things that we don't have. Health authorities aren't talking to each other about brain injury.
It is a complex issue. I mean, when you work in local government, nothing is straightforward and simple. And, you take a step back and look at the many different expressions of society over, the centuries, and each society has its struggles. And I think we're at a time now where we're seeing the cohesiveness and the order in our communities degenerate a little bit compared to 20 years ago or so. And I think it is a sign that we need to make changes in how we are putting our resources and our energy.
The Critic Center for Family a number of years ago did a position paper looking at the issue of homelessness and brain injury. And we came out with just astounding financial numbers regarding the issues. In the acute care setting for survivor brain injury, it's about $1,600 a day. In a prison system, it's about $323 a day. For residing in McDonald House, this Craig brain injury resident is about $245 a day. But getting to Zed, living independently on their own, the cost is $120 a month. So it's really quite astounding. Like, if we can move people along that continuum from A to Z, keep them out of the prison system, just do the math. The numbers just speak for themselves. That's why we need to invest in survivors. It comes back again. Pay now or pay later.
About myself in the heart of despair, looking for a way out, searching for air. With no doubt, you took those words from my mouth.
Why do you want to help children with brain injury?
It's because I was helped when I had a brain injury, and I still have one, and they helped me tremendously. And the main thing is to try to help a little sector of people that are not getting help. And children are very, very important. They're important to me because I have children, my own grandchildren, stepchildren, and they were all a wonderful experience for me. And like I said, I'm more family orientated.
This TBI is fierce, it's holding my skin. I need help from my peers, they'll help me begin. Cause I'm on my way, I'm on my way to. I'm on my way to feeling better than this. Maybe not yet, I'll never resist, but abolish being upset.
So an attitude of gratitude is the biggest part of my life now. People say, how can you feel grateful? You got this cancer and stuff. And it's like, well, okay, there's some reason I have it. It's trying to tell me something. My body's trying to tell me something. Maybe I still have something left unsaid or undone. So I have to see it out. Maybe giving them, medical profession that I don't have a lot of faith in. Maybe there's someone's going to be helped somewhere along the way.
By doing the same things over and over again and repeating the same behaviors, and your brain starts to eventually click into those behaviors, and it's down to everything. Behavior modification is what it's called. I'm lucky, man. I worked hard for this place. I had to prove myself. See, I had to prove myself. I had to be at that house at the Critic for 3 years. Actually, I stayed longer. I stayed 4. I stayed an extra year because I liked it. That was an apartment with probationary things. I had to go to my support shifts. I had to do whatever. If they told me, go find a job, I had to go find a job. Not that they did that, but whatever they told me while I was there, I had to do. If I didn't, that I wouldn't get this apartment here. And they're like, not too many people make it. Like there's like, say there's 5 people right there now. Out of those 5 people, only 2 of them are gonna get an apartment. The other 3 are gonna be left to their own. And it's because of the supply. There's no supply. The city doesn't have, the only way you can get one of these places is when a person dies.
Family of a 12-year-old girl who was brutalized by a school cop is now suing the Kenosha, Wisconsin Police Department after they say that she sustained a serious brain injury as a result of the interaction with the cop.
So you're great drive.
Great.
Good copy, Wilson and Roberts.
There he goes. There he goes.
Would you rather have $500 or give $1,000 to a stranger?
No, just don't give something with brain injuries like mine.
You'd rather donate the money?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking you, what happened?
Explosion and spiral.
Had the G-tube in. He was also able to talk some by the time he left. He was also starting to walk and to do some playful activities.
Jingle bell, jingle